My name is Marcius Extavour. I went to the University of Toronto, and my degree is in quantum optics and atomic physics. I applied for the fellowship because I was always interested in politics and policy, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity to get a chance to do it. Coming from a scientific background, you don't often get a lot of chance to sort of move laterally into the policy area, and this seemed like exactly what the fellowship is designed for. I was working in the energy industry after I finished my PhD, and this seemed like a great opportunity to just try something different and continue in the policy direction. I worked in the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. So this is the committee that handles everything to do with energy, natural resource issues, policy, regulation, the Department of Energy. And the Department of Interior. I interviewed all over the place like everybody does. It sort of came down to personal connection, having a good feeling about the staff that I'd be working with, colleagues that I thought I could get along with, and also this sort of idea of focusing a little more deeply on a subject area. So the committee versus a personal office was a big decision for us new fellows, and it seemed like a very confusing choice, and it was confusing. But I sort of thought, well, if I work on a committee, we're always going to be doing energy-related issues. I'm not going to do healthcare, I'm not going to do housing, I'm not going to do transportation. And also there'll be a little less of the day-to-day politics and more of the big-scale politics and sort of policy grind. So the chance to really work on legislation inside the committee, which is what we do. And it's worked out. I've liked it. You know, I miss having the breadth of issues sometimes, but energy and natural resources is an enormous area that's always hot, so there's no shortage of work. I came in really wanting to work on electricity generation technologies, especially renewables. You know, coming from science, that's what I knew the best, and just seemed the most interesting to me. I've ended up working a lot on traditional energy issues, especially in oil and gas, which I hadn't expected. So I've been working on the Canadian tar sands, also called the Canadian oil sands, depending on who you ask. I've worked on rare earth elements, which has been a big focus of mine this year. That's a US issue in particular, but a global issue. Working on helium gas right now, working on some draft legislation for our committee. Those have been sort of my main projects. Oh, and a fourth one I picked up recently is solar energy. The way our committee works is, you know, every topic you can imagine is divided up between the staff. The cool thing about being a fellow is that I can sort of collaborate with different people at different times and just work with them and pick up projects. So those have been my main 4 focus points, and then, you know, a smattering of things here and there. Offshore oil and gas regulation, nuclear technology, oversight of the DOE, working with the DOE on some of their R&D programs. Just generally trying to be proactive and get my hands on anything that's science-y or tech-related. The problems are a lot more challenging than I thought. I really got a sense how interconnected each of the issues is. So from the outside, you think, okay, electricity or, you know, clean water. It's such a, you know, the solutions maybe seem obvious, or it seems like they're being polluted by other factors. But when you're working here inside the legislative process, you really understand how everything really is interconnected and how difficult it is to move in one area without touching another area and bringing in, you know, the adverse consequences. I've had a good opportunity to take a few trips, and that's been fascinating. I just came back from a trip in the southern US to visit the Helium Reserve, the Federal Helium Reserve, which this is where basically all the helium comes from, not just in the States, but most of the world, or a huge fraction of it. And it's basically in this old gas field in Amarillo, Texas. So that was really cool. Just getting to go on site, visit with government officials there, visiting with industry people that work out there, just really going to the site, because Washington's a really insular place. So actually talking to people on the front lines is cool. I got to go on a trip to Canada, which was kind of funny, working on these oil sands. I got to actually take a tour of the oil sands, which is totally fascinating. It's just a gigantic industrial installation. It's a mine. It's, you know, a very important issue, and to see it up close was really mind-boggling, the scale of it, and just really to see what it looks like and see how it's being developed in a fairly remote part of the country. Some of the other great experiences have been sitting in on meetings, you know. Before a committee meeting, my boss, the chairman, Senator Bingaman, will call the Democratic senators into his office. Just sort of literally being the fly on the wall as a staffer in that meeting is really cool. We kind of stand around the back as the staffers. We watch the senators sit over to the side and have their discussion. And that's been really cool, just to see you know, the political calculations coming directly from their mouths, not from a staff or from a newspaper article or something like that. So being in meetings that I otherwise would have no business being in and would never be invited to has been amazing. It was very rare that somebody came to me and said, let's talk about atom-photon interactions, or, optical properties of matter, which is kind of my specialty. It was more in using my scientific network to make outside connections that were helpful to projects we were working on here. So, I've really found that people that work here, they don't have a scientific background. They're smart people, so they can come up to speed on an issue, but they might not have a feel for it, and in particular, they probably don't know anybody that works in that area. So being able to say, oh, I know Professor so-and-so, that, this is her specialty, or I happen to know somebody that works at this institute who knows somebody else that we can bring on board to come testify at a hearing, or something like that. So understanding who to reach out to, that's kind of how I use my background. And also understanding how scientific issues themselves are connected. Talked about interconnectedness of issues earlier. The way that technical issues are connected to each other is more apparent, I think, to somebody with a science background. So for instance, this helium story, I took over the project from someone that was working on it from a natural gas angle, because that's where it comes from natural gas drilling. But I sort of came in and said, hey, this is actually a huge issue in the research science community, people that do cryogenics, and people that do medical research also really care about this, and sort of bringing that constituency in. So that was a great example, because somebody that that didn't have scientific training, they just might not have thought of that. So I've ended up staying on at the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, which has been great. It's going to be a busy fall. Even though things have been very slow in the Senate so far this year, legislatively in terms of bills becoming law, there's still a ton of work for us staffers. So staying on with the committee and continuing to work on some of those same issues I talked about. It was sort of a no-brainer, because this is where I'd spent the year. This is where they needed some additional help working on this issue, and I was in a perfect position to say, hey, I'm available to stick around for a little longer and help to work on it. It's been a really, really great job. For a scientist that's interested in public issues, or even just a scientist that's interested in understanding how the whole research enterprise works, when you send off your grant application, where does it go to? It's been really great. Applying as a Canadian citizen was a little bit different. The application process was pretty much the same. Working here has been pretty much the same. The differences were that work authorization has to be worked out. So that's something that any foreign national has to think about before they apply or while they're applying. And then in terms of day-to-day stuff, it's just, for a Canadian, it's been pretty easy, because so many of the issues that we work on here are the same issues, or they affect Canada directly. And so I sort of came in thinking, well, maybe they'll look at my application, but they're going to want to know, why do I want to do this? Because I'm working for, the government of a different country. And that was basically my answer. These issues are interrelated. And when it comes to energy and a lot of other science policy issues, they are global issues. And DC is, if not the center, a major center for work on any of those issues. I really expected there to be problems, and there was no problem. The most it would come up was, are you Canadian? People would see that I had done degrees at the University of Toronto and worked there, and they'd say, are you Canadian? And then I would think, the first few times I thought, oh no, they're going to tell me it's not possible and I can't work here. They'd just say, oh, or not mention it at all, or say, that's funny. So I was shocked, actually, that it really didn't come up. It's been a great year. I've really had a good time. One of the best jobs I've ever had. You should apply because you get to learn about the process from a research perspective or from a policy perspective. You get to meet a whole different cross-section of people, and really understanding how they view science and the scientific world is really important. Whether you continue it on with bench science or in any other role within science, I think that's really important. It's fun. DC is a cool town. You meet a ton of other great fellows. That's been one of the best parts about the fellowship. Just a really great, dynamic, interesting group of people. Some super nerds, some super laid back, just kind of the full spectrum, all united by kind of being interested and keen and trying something a little bit different. So those are some great reasons to try it.